Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Susie Horton. I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council and I will be chairing this meeting. Before we start, a bit of housekeeping. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts and assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, if you did sign in, please sign out when you leave today. Everyone who's speaking, please can you do so via a microphone, and it will be recorded and broadcast on the website, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. As I said, please use the microphones. Remember to switch them off when you've finished. Just the usual statement that Cabinet have read the reports. So when officers are presenting their particular report, highlight any developments that have occurred since publication, or give a brief summary. Introductions. I will start to my left.
Peter Bold, City Solicitor.
Natalie Brommer-Pearl, Chief Executive.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance and Resources.
Councillor Hugh Mason, St Jude Ward.
Councillor Kimberly Barrett, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Greening the City.
Thank you. James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Good afternoon, Chair. Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Central Services.
Peter Candlish, Councillor for Eastern Cranes Water and Cabinet Member for Transport.
Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services.
Paddy May, Corporate Strategy Manager.
Andy Biddle, Director of Adult Social Care.
Claire Watkins, Business Manager.
Councillor Graham Heaney, St Jude Ward, giving a deputation.
Councillor Russell Simpson, Hillsey Ward.
Councillor Raymond Dent, Copner Ward.
Welcome to everyone for this meeting. I probably should mention, as well as being Deputy Leader, I'm the Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education. So, as Councillor Heaney mentioned, he will be giving a deputation on item 4. Apologies from Councillor Steve Pitt, Councillor Lee Hunt, Councillor Darren Sanders, Councillor Dave Ashmore, and Councillor Matthew Winnington will be late if he gets here by the end of the meeting, but he has asked me to explicitly say that he is giving blood and therefore he thinks that's a very good excuse for being late, which I agree. Are there any declarations of interest?
Chair, I participated as part of the scrutiny panel that is referred to in items 8 and 9 last year.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Okay. So, item 3 is a record of previous meeting held on the 15th of May 2024. Members, for those who were here, is that an accurate record of the meeting?
Proposed as accurate record.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Okay. So we'll go on to item 4, which is appointment of 2 outside organisations and member champion. And this is where Councillor Heaney wishes to do a deputation.
Chairman, before you come to Councillor Heaney's deputation, it might be sensible to put item 5 at the end of the agenda, since Councillor Matthew Winnington may wish to speak to that.
Very, very sensible idea, Councillor Mason. Thank you for reminding me. So we will put that to the end. Item 4, and Graham, do you want to do your deputation now then?
First of all, an apology. I've got a problem with my left ear because it's hay fever and it's playing up and I can't hear properly. So this is why I'm sitting this side so I can hear you better. My voice sounds a bit strange. I'm not sure whether I'm projecting enough, so if I'm not speaking loud enough, you'll have to shout at me. I wanted to check about recommendations that you're going to make, because there's no formal recommendation in relation to the King's Theatre Trust, which I obviously am going to speak about. Is there any recommendation on that?
What we normally do in this meeting is we come to these and take each one of the ones where there's a contested position and then make a decision. The Cabinet's been through them already. So do you want me to tell you now?
Well, it'd be good to know. Yeah.
Okay, so I think is that the first? No, that's not the first contested one. It is the King's Theatre Trust. Let me just find it. Which is Councillor Hugh Mason.
Okay. The reason I'm come to talk to you about this is because, as you will see from the report, it says current representatives, Councillor Mason and Councillor Graham Heaney. I need to take you back to last year when the Cabinet made its recommendations on the same report, and I was actually recommended to be put onto the board. However, the King's Theatre Trust would not accept my nomination from you. I subsequently followed that up in correspondence with officers as well as with the theatre. The theatre didn't respond to any of my correspondence. I wrote twice. And I understand from correspondence that I received from officers that, in fact, at the time that that report was put forward, which recommended 2 nominees, and which was accepted by the Cabinet, apparently the leader of the council had actually made an agreement with the King's Theatre that they should reduce the nominations to 1. This was confirmed in an email I had from a senior officer who I wrote to in October, because I was obviously following this up after coming back from leave. The email which I have says, I understand from the Chief Executive this was agreed with Councillor Vernon Jackson in August 22. I'm afraid that the other officer and I are not involved in the appointment of trustees or the agreement of the trust allocation. Now, what concerns me here is that the leader of the council made a decision about nominations which wasn't communicated to officers and wasn't communicated to Democratic Services at the time it was made, and therefore the Democratic Services officers presented a report which didn't actually reflect what the situation was. None of us were aware of this, despite the fact that Councillor Vernon Jackson was sitting in the room at the time, last June. He didn't appear to remember that he'd agreed with the King's Theatre Trust to reduce the nominations from 2 to 1. Also, there was no public record of this and no record of it actually happening. As I said, I followed this up, and I did question whether, in fact, the leader of the council had the right to do that, and whether, in fact, this matter should have been brought directly to the Cabinet to say there is a recommendation that we reduce it from 2 to 1. This is the reason why we're going to do that, and therefore the Cabinet could either accept or not accept that recommendation. So it's really a part of a historical problem, but I think it's also about, one, proper decision-making, because I think it was careless not to inform officers and the Democratic Services that a decision had been made. Secondly, I don't think it was the leader of the council had the right to make that decision on his own. It was a Cabinet decision. It was never brought to Cabinet for a decision. It's obviously reflected in the recommendation here, but we still have no reasons as to why that's been changed. I am aware of the reasons why it's been changed, because the King's Theatre requested it, because they are in some sort of a dispute with us about the building and whether we should have representation or not. They wanted to see it reduced. So I wanted to make that point because I think it's important to make sure we do make decisions properly. And also that for some months we were misled about the situation and it caused a good deal of confusion. And certainly from my perspective, I had no idea about this until 3 or 4 months afterwards when it all emerged as to what had gone on. The King's Theatre, obviously, if they wish to request lesser nominations, they're perfectly entitled to do that. And it's perfectly entitled for the Cabinet to agree that. But what I'm concerned about is the lack of transparency and the carelessness with which the decision was made.
Thank you for your deputation. I don't know whether officers have presume. I have to say that's news to me. I didn't know either. So I feel like we need to go ahead with the proposal today, but I think it's a fair question to ask about the procedure around that, whether the King's Theatre want to stick to their one position, which is what we've got on the papers in front of us. Councillor Mason.
As a trustee last year, I was not aware that this decision had been made until well into the year, and so I was not aware that it had been formally made, and I don't know how this decision came to be.
For the purposes of today, though, on that, according to the paperwork that we've got, it's one appointment. So I guess the takeaway from today is to check with the King's Theatre whether they still want one appointment. And I'm assuming that they do, because that was the decision that was made. But I can't answer for them or change that decision in this meeting. Are there any other comments on that? So what I'll do is assume that all of the uncontested positions will go through according to the paperwork, and look at the ones which are contested, which has been discussed with Cabinet. So the first one is the Aspects Visual Arts Trust, which is an observer position, and that's Councillor Chris Atwell. The next one we've discussed, which is Councillor Hugh Mason for the King's Theatre Trust. The Lord Mayor of Portsmouth Coronation Homes Board, it will be Councillor Jason Fazakerley, because he is the Lord Mayor and it's a Lord Mayor's position. The New Theatre Royal Trust is Councillor Vernon Jackson. The Southern Coastal Group and Standing Conference on Problems Associated with the Coastline, SCOPAC, it's Councillor Hugh Mason, but Councillor Judith Smythe was also interested in this, and Councillor Hugh Mason suggested that she would be welcome as a deputy. I don't know whether, James, whether that's in our gift to do that, but I think it's a generous offer, and I think Councillor Hugh Mason seems to have been on it for a while and thinks that that will be okay. Do you have any comment about that, Councillor Mason?
Yes, it's not a very formal grouping, and I think that Councillor Judith Smythe would be welcome at any of their meetings.
Thank you. The Training Standards South East Limited is Councillor Lee Hunt, and the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Group is Councillor Susie Horton, me. So that's all the contested ones. The other thing probably worth mentioning is the champions. So the Heritage Champion is now, there was a paper that was brought to Cabinet a couple of years ago which looked at the role of a champion, and over a period of time whether that could arguably have become business as usual, which is often a really good news story. And so over the last few years the number of champion roles have depleted in a way for that very good reason. So the Heritage Champion, which current appointment is Councillor Lee Hunt, is now being deleted because it's considered to be absorbed into relevant portfolio. Similarly, with the Third Sector and City of Service Champion, that now role is absorbed within a portfolio. And that leaves the LGBTQ plus Young Persons Champion. This is the one where it's open to other people to put their names forward, and in the process of sorting out these positions, no one actually put their name forward. So I put my name forward again because, as you might understand, that I wouldn't want the young people to think that they didn't have a member who was interested in becoming their champion. But since that point, Councillor Mary Vallerly has requested to be a deputy. Now, whilst we've not really done deputies before, I've absolutely got no problem at all with sharing what I do with Councillor Vallely and inviting her along to see what we do. And the Armed Forces Liaison Champion, which is a requirement, is that it has to be a Cabinet member. So that's Councillor Vernon Jackson, with Councillor Tom Coles as a deputy. That was last year. And then this year, it's Councillor Steve Pitt, Councillor Vernon Jackson as the deputy, and also with Councillor Tom Coles remaining as the deputy. And finally, the Women, Children and Domestic Violence Champion last year was Councillor Charlotte Gerarda, and also this year is going to be Councillor Charlotte Gerarda. I think I've covered everything. James, I should have come to you probably to present it all before I charged in after the... is there anything that you want to add about what I... have I missed anything out?
Thank you. That's half of my script already done perfectly, so thank you very much, Deputy Leader. Just to note, there are also some vacancies, some of which have been long-standing vacancies, but just for completeness, there's one vacancy on the Farlington Marshes Management Committee, two on the Highford Portsmouth Friendship Committee, one on the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Local Government Association, one on the Mary Rose Trust, which is a nomination for approval by their board, one on South East Employers, and the West Paulsgrove Scout and Community Association. Also, the small table at the end of Appendix 1 has been added this year for completeness. It lists company director appointments that are purely for information for Cabinet to note. And when making appointments, can I just draw Cabinet's attention to Appendix 2, which is Part 4E of the Council's Constitution, Appointments to Outside Bodies and Organisations Political Proportionality Protocol. Finally, for those appointed to positions, can I just draw your attention to the relevant guidance and protocols in Appendices 3 and 4, along with the requirement to update your register of interest within 28 days, where applicable, in line with the Councillor's Code of Conduct. Thank you.
Apologies, James. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is that Cabinet agrees the appointments that we've just been through to represent the Council on those outside organisations set out in Appendix 1 for the 2024-25 municipal year, and secondly, to agree the member champion positions and appointments for the 24-25 municipal year. Thank you. Okay, we're not doing item 5 till the end, so item 6, continuing to support residents with the cost of living. I'm assuming it's Mark Sage is going to present this report. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so Mark Sage, Tackling Poverty Coordinator, presenting... Sorry, can you hear me okay, or shall I'll move closer to the mic? Apologies. Presenting a report on continuing to support residents with the cost of living. So the report outlines help for residents with the cost of living, which includes help that's funded by the Household Support Fund, and it also outlines the position to continue providing support from October this year when the current Household Support Fund grant ends. So the report says, although inflation has significantly reduced from the peaks we saw between autumn 22 and summer 23, prices for essential goods and services remain high. There have been some other positive signs, with the national minimum wage reaching 2/3 of median earnings nationally, and with median earnings in Portsmouth increasing at a faster rate since December. But we know that residents continue to seek help and advice with the cost of living, with 1,800 calls to the cost of living helpline and 94,000 views of the online cost of living hub between April 23 and March 24. So the report outlines how Household Support Fund is being used to support with the cost of living between April and September this year, which includes information and advice, helping people to apply for support, money advice, and signposting to other specialist support. And the Household Support Fund is used to provide a range of support again, including vouchers for children eligible for free school meals distributed via schools. We've got 3 different application-based schemes we'll be running during this period. There's funding to extend the Have Fun Pompey programme to support other low-income families who don't qualify for free school meals. And there's, again, funding for voluntary sector services that are supporting people in financial hardship, including food banks, community larders and pantries, and community meals. The current position is that Household Support Fund ends on the 30th of September this year, so there's no grant funding at this stage for councils to support residents in financial hardship going into the autumn and winter. Cabinet decided in February that the council will continue to deliver support with the cost of living until at least March 2025, but without additional grant, the council will need to target limited resources to maintain the essential elements of support. So the outline plan for that is included in the report, but we will continue to develop that over the coming months based on our evaluation of current delivery and the ongoing impact of the cost of living to ensure that our offer meets residents' needs and makes best use of the resources. Work to support residents in financial hardship or struggling with the cost of living feeds into the overall council priority to reduce poverty in Portsmouth. So this report is to provide an update on this element of that work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that report and all your work. Members, any comments? Oh, Councillor App.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for everything you do around tackling poverty. As Mark just said, government grant finishes at the end of September, and we're already at the end of June, which is troubling. So, Chair, as the report is an information-only report, can I suggest that we note an action alongside our accepting the report to ask the leader to write to the new government requesting that they extend the funding at least until the end of the financial year to avoid a cliff edge in September, and that they consult with local government on giving flexibility to use funding over a longer period of time to enable councils to avoid future cliff edges. We know demand, as Mark's just pointed out, demand for support, the Household Support Fund isn't easing, and though we are doing what we can to provide ongoing support, the local authority does not have the finance to plug the enormous gap left if there is no Household Support Fund going forward.
Thank you. I think that's a really good suggestion. I know we've had a lot of discussions about the frustrations in not having the long-term ability to plan for this sustainability. Any other comments from Cabinet? No, and as you say, Councillor Atwell, it's a report for noting, but always a report that's I always find it very interesting. It's always really, really well thought out, and I think what I'm proud of that this council has done is really considered how we've used that money. We've constantly looked at where the need is in a way greatest and tried to be as creative as possible, and great thanks from the whole Cabinet to Mark Sage for all the work that he's done on that over the years. So thank you. So it's a report for noting, and we will hope that the new government actually does realise the importance of this to local authorities. Thank you. Item 7 are we on? Me and numbers. Yes, 7, which is the response to housing and social care scrutiny review. Are you presenting this, James? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Cabinet. My name is James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services, and I'm joined by Adam Hardwick, Assistant Director of Building Services. So the report before you contains the officer's response to the recommendations of the Housing and Social Care Scrutiny Review of landlords' practice when dealing with damp and mould. The scrutiny panel reviewed the practice of social housing landlords, including the City Council, and also private sector landlords, and that panel was chaired by Councillor Dent. The scrutiny report has already been published, and this can be found on the City Council's website, and the report before you contains a link at the end of the report in the background list of documents. Members will recall the coroner's finding published in November 2022 that the death of Awab Ishaq in 2020 was found to be due to prolonged exposure to mould, and the response of the landlord was heavily questioned in that case. The scrutiny review, therefore, took place in a timely point. It was an opportunity for landlords in the city to reflect on their practice, and the actual review itself took place between July 2023 and February 2024. Section 3 of the report contains background information and a summary of the evidence that the panel considered. The scrutiny panel made 10 recommendations to Cabinet, and those can be found in Appendix A of the Cabinet report. In Section 4 of the report, we have noted for context that the Local Authority Housing Service had initiated a review of its practice when dealing with damp and mould in council-owned properties. That didn't arise because of a specific concern, but we felt it to be the right thing to do, and a working group was established to coordinate our response to the government review and also to check our own practices. We also asked our internal audit team to audit our practice, and that work culminated in bringing forward an updated damp and mould policy, which was agreed by the Housing Cabinet on the 22nd of February. That's relevant for the report before you because the damp and mould working group were then able to absorb the recommendations from the scrutiny panel into the work that was underway, and also then the scrutiny panel's work influenced the council's housing policy. In section 4.4, we show how the 10 recommendations can be taken forward. In many cases, the recommendations can be taken forward by the council's housing service and also the private sector housing team. There are recommendations specifically for housing associations, and in section 4.5, we outline that whilst the panel and cabinet cannot mandate change for housing associations, we do have good working relationships with housing associations in the city, and we will use a landlord forum formed to share practice to promote the findings of the scrutiny panel. The recommendations in section 2 therefore ask you to thank the panel for its work in this area, which has been influential in the direction of our policy, and in 2.2 that you note the panel's report, its recommendations, Appendix A, and the officer's response as set out in section 4.4. I'm happy to take any questions.
Cabinet, any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Mason.
4.4.3 refers to the damp and mould working group. Could Mr. Hill please tell us, A, what is the makeup of this working group? Does it contain specialists in damp and mould? And has its recommendations been fully implemented?
Thank you. I might ask Adam to step in with some of the detail. The working group is an officer group consisting of members of the building service, the housing management teams, and our private sector housing teams. It was designed to aid the review of our own policy and also the recommendations that came from internal audit. They do have the ability to pull on expertise should they need to, and they've considered the government's recommendations arising from their own review, so they were well placed to inform our own practice and policy, as well as discuss those changes with housing associations in the city as well. All of their work fed into the revised policy which came through to the Housing Cabinet decision meeting. And the working group continues, I should say. It hasn't stood down. It's continuing to take forward both the recommendations from the scrutiny panel report and other changes that we wish to make.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? No, in which case, that leaves me to thank the panel for its work in undertaking the review and the resulting report. Thanks for coming along to the meeting today. And the Cabinet notes the panel's report and recommendations as set out in Appendix A, together with the officer responses to the recommendations as set out in 4.4 of this report. Thank you very much. Councillor Winnington. Welcome.
Thank you. I have no declaration of interest.
Have we had anyone else join the room since we did introductions? I thought so.
Sorry, Jane Lemaire, Head of Economic Development and Skills.
Welcome, Jane. Okay, so we're on to item 8, which is the response to the review into education, employment and training opportunities for care experienced young adults aged 18 to 25. Is there... They're on their way. Shall I defer that and go on to item 9 for when they... Okay, so I'll come on to item 9, which is also another scrutiny report. So the response to the Economic Development, Culture and Leisure Scrutiny Panel, brackets, High Streets. Is this you, Jane? Or is this... Is it joint effort? Excellent. Over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yes, so Jane and I come from 2 separate departments, Economic Development and Culture and Leisure, and we work together to engage in a scrutiny process. And as you mentioned, the topic is review of the Economic Development and Regeneration Strategy, focusing on the High Street direction. So we had a range of witnesses available for the meetings, both internal and external witnesses. And you'll see from the appendix that the recommendations cross a range of areas and teams, including economic growth and bid process, street entertainment and licensing, communications and transport. And also to say that several of the initiatives highlighted are already underway, such as the bid process and a demand-responsive transport bus service at Port Solent. Thank you.
Jane?
I'm happy to support and take questions as we go through. Claire's covered that eloquently.
Thank you. Cabinet, are there any questions or comments to make about the report? Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, and thank you for all the reports. There was some discussion on this when it came to cabinets. In terms of how scrutiny is done. And I think this is an apposite example of the issues that we have. So I'm looking at the Cabinet agenda for a meeting of the 11th of June 2015, of which we had a report from the Economic Development, Culture and Leisure Scrutiny Panel, which was called Revitalising Local High Streets and Secondary Shopping Areas, with response reports. At the time, I sat on that panel. I was the vice chair, and both myself and I was vice chair, and the chair of the panel, then Councillor Judy Swan, came and presented the report. So, what I don't see in this scrutiny at all is any kind of going back and saying, have we done this before? Has this been looked at before? Is there anything we can learn from it? Is there anything we can look at? And indeed, the Scrutiny Management Panel, when I was on scrutiny, when I was in both opposition and then when I first started as backbencher, the Scrutiny Management Panel would take a look at old scrutiny and actually do update reports. If that was done, then they would have known that things had happened in the past. And in fact, a lot of that stuff was done. I was looking through the report prior to this meeting, and there would have been a lot that we wouldn't have to have retrod and done it. Now, I'm not sure if the chair of the scrutiny panel who presented this report is here today. Oh, you're here. You are. Excellent. Excellent. But I think it would have been something that could have been done, and indeed to actually come and present your recommendations. So I think we have to look at this in a better way, and I think we have to be a bit more cognizant of what's been done in the past. But it does come down to the Scrutiny Management Panel. The Scrutiny Management Panel has to take control of scrutiny and has to actually meet and do its job properly, rather than doing things that are just maybe retreading things that have been done in the past, but also actually reviewing things that have been done in a systematic way. And what I would like to say, and I would like to thank the scrutiny panel for actually, well, you're here, but also the fact that this is a scrutiny panel that's obviously met and done a report that has taken a lot of evidence and done a lot of good work. Because that hasn't been the case in the recent past with a lot of our scrutiny panels. And it just has not, and we haven't had that at all. So I'd like to thank Russell for being here today. I'd like to thank Russell for actually chairing his panel and doing a report that's, that it has some very good elements. But if we're going to do reports, we do have to have a bit more from the scrutiny management panel in terms of actually looking at what's been done in the past and building on it, rather than, I don't know if Russell was aware that the scrutiny was done 9 years ago on this very subject.
You can ask a question for clarity, but you can't do a speech.
Okay, I was going to say, which part of the report? Only because the report really came from the fact that the local plan was based in 2019 and a lot of it changed due to COVID. So that was one of the reasons why we re-looked at this. So even if it was done previously, it would have been out of date. So the question is, which part?
Thank you for sticking to a question.
Sorry,
So,
if you
Councillor
want me to,
Winnington, if you're happy to.
Yeah, I think the one of the things that we did back 10 years, well, it was 10 years ago when we started this, was I think particularly about some of the involvement we got with some of the retailers at the time, and we were particularly looking. I know you were looking at high streets in a more broad context. We were looking at secondary and tertiary. And I think one of the things that we particularly did was go after, so for example, one of them was Tangier Road in Baffins. We also had ones that stick in mind in particular were the Highland Road bit, so the bit nearest Albert Road, for example. And we actually got some of our people involved who were actually retailers there. I think the other thing is as well was about some of the work on having groups of getting like retail groups up in those areas where they didn't exist before. And obviously there's a particular one in there, if you have a look at it, was specifically around North End as well, because that had been somewhere that then as now had really struggled in terms of losing retailers, etc. So I do agree in terms of there are things that would have changed since 2019 and especially since COVID. But I do think there was things in there that, as I said, it's more a criticism of the scrutiny management panel and the scrutiny management of what's been done since then, rather than specifically the EDCL, because really it's the scrutiny management panel who should have been going, hang on a minute, this was done in the past, have you looked at this, do you want to do something that's related to it or something that's completely different?
Thank you for that reply. Councillor Candlish.
I would just build on what's said there. As someone who was new to the scrutiny panel process last year and sat on 2, and in conversations I've had with both other councillors and with officers around scrutiny panel, I think there is actually some good work that could be done to improve the preparation of members for those scrutiny panels, which will hopefully lead to a better result. And, for example, thoughts around direction to previous reports that have addressed this area as a starting point or as another source of information would actually be excellent to do. So I think there is something we should take away from here about scrutiny panel management and processes more broadly that is wider than for this specific report, because otherwise I agree with much of what has been said. And I thank the officers for taking away what was going to be my 2 brilliant pieces of contribution to the debate by covering it off before I got there.
I'm sure there's more brilliance to come from you.
Very little, I'm afraid, Chair.
bringing it back to this, but I think there's some really good points there to be taken around about the process and the preparation and support for the scrutiny process. But if we can just bring our attention back to this particular one, the recommendations are that the panel is thanked for its work in undertaking the review. And again, thank you for coming to this meeting. Sorry, I couldn't give you lots of deputation next time, Councillor Simpson, deputation. And the second thing is that Cabinet notes and considers the recommendations together with the officer responses to the recommendations which are set out in Appendix 1 to this report. Thank you, everyone. We'll now go back to the last one, which is item 8, which is also scrutiny. So it's a response to the Education, Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel's recommendations regarding a review into education, employment and training opportunities for our care experienced young adults aged 18 to 25 years. Sam, are you going to?
Yes, it is.
Do you want to introduce yourself and also Sarah?
Yeah, hello there. I'm Sam Bushby. I'm the Deputy Director for Children and Families.
And I'm Sarah Daly. I'm the Director of Children, Families and Education.
Thank you.
So I'm aware you've all had the opportunity to see the report, which is the response, but embedded within that is the full report of the scrutiny panel. So I'm not going to read through all of that on the basis that everybody's had the opportunity to read through it. But just to highlight that this panel, we met on 4 occasions, the panel, and the focus was on the opportunities for our care experienced young people in terms of their access to education, employment and training. And the reason this was chosen an area of focus is we know that actually we want to enable far more of our care experienced young people to be able to access opportunities. So through those sessions, the panel heard from a number of people really as we looked at, we heard from PAs in terms, so the personal advisors that support our care experienced young people. We heard about the work that they do and through that some of the barriers for our care experienced young people in terms of why it can be so difficult to access opportunities or actually if you do access why it can be even more of a challenge to be able to stay within those opportunities and make full use of them. So we heard about those, we heard about the work done by the PAs to support our young people with that. And we also heard from our young people themselves in terms of what has helped them, what their hopes are for the future. We had a number of education providers join and talk about what is available through them, but also what else how they could be supported. And that was particularly in terms of being trauma-informed and how we could support them in being trauma-informed. Because we know that actually understanding behaviour and potentially some of the behaviours of our young people, looking at those through a trauma lens gives a totally different eye sometimes in terms of interpreting and understanding some of the behaviours in front of you. We heard about the work of our Careers and Employability Hub and what that provides for our young people, but also what we've had in the course of the scrutiny was also our Employability Academy launching and the work that we're doing through that to really create, engage with people in the city, employers, and really create as many opportunities as we can. And I think that a key part that we make again today is that's not just externally within the city, but also within Portsmouth City Council itself. What can we do in terms of making as many opportunities within the city, within all directorates for our care experienced young people, but also with people that we contract with. So actually we are their parents, we are their corporate parents, and there are many, many opportunities for us to be able to create opportunities across so many different or that would need so many different skills and so many different areas. So it really was, we were saying, the scrutiny panel was saying, as a council, what can we do for our children and young people? So you'll see the recommendations set out here. What I would highlight is it was certainly, as the person responsible for the operational practice, it was really good to hear back from the scrutiny panel that they had no concerns about our approach and our practice. And in fact, they really could see why our PAs are so valued, as well as the work of the Hub in supporting our young people. It really was what else we can do in terms of really embracing the academy, creating opportunities across our directorates, and I think those are captured in the recommendations that obviously we've laid out in the response to say that we very much embrace.
Thank you, Sam, for that explanation around and highlighting some of the content of the report. I think it is, I mean, you've kind of nicked my key line, which is I think what was really important about this, and I think the scrutiny panel themselves fed this back, is a real depth of understanding around what it is to be a corporate parent. So this is not just scrutinising something that the council does at arm's length. These are our children, and these are our responsibility. And some of the stories, of course, that come out about about the opportunities that when these young people are afforded opportunities with the protection and the support and the wraparound that lots of other young people get, they flourish just like other young people. So it's and I think it's fair to say, I can't speak for people, but I did go to the last scrutiny panel session, and I think there was a lot of positive feedback about how much the panel had learnt, as well as how much they'd scrutinised. So thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you for bringing the report. I mentioned it before when we spoke about it previously, but 2.7, where it's been discussed about the modes of transport, sort of for our young adults to be able to get to their first point, whether their employment for the first time, but there's always that worry about how they're going to get there. Of course, as it mentioned, salary, you work and then you get it. So how are they going to get there? The fact that they've got this offer so that they can get to their workplace throughout wherever it is in the city and be able to do that, I think that's a really excellent thing that we can offer them, because they should have that opportunity to be able to go to work. They want to work. And we should be able to support them. So to have that offer, I think, is really, really good. So thank you for putting that in. And also where it mentions about, I just want to say there was a point in the report talking about the fostering. As someone who's got members of the family who do foster, I actually sent them a link to the report to have a look last week, and they looked through it, and they've said they loved it because they feel like they're obviously parents, and they feel like they're the corporate parents on top as well. And they said the support is next to none from the city. So I think hopefully that's good feedback anyway. And the fact that people are looking at these kind of things, reading them and agreeing and thinking, and that we have that level of support as well, not just for our care leavers and our young adults, but also for the families and the adults that do across the city who do support these people. So hopefully that's some good feedback, because we know what it's like in this council. You never get good feedback. It's always a bad feedback. So we always take the good feedback when we can. But yes, no, that's coming from people who have the support from us, and we couldn't do it without them. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Sam.
Firstly, to say thank you. We do love some positive feedback. But also, just to update in terms of the bus passes, I mean, that is what we've included that in our care leaver offer. But I know at the time this was written, we were saying that we were seeking funding, but just to confirm that we have obtained that funding. Brilliant. So it is very much something that we'll be offering.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much. So the recommendation is that the panel is thanked for its work in undertaking the review, and that Cabinet notes the recommendations of the review, which have been set out. I'm not going to read them all, but we've read the report. So that's that. So thank you, Sam and Sarah, for coming along and presenting the report. So item 9 now. No, we've done 9. Item 10, which is the Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking Statement. And Caroline is going to present.
If I forget something, though, I think Natasha will help out. So I'm aware that you've all read the report. Just a reminder that the annual modern slavery statement is a legal requirement for us as a council, but actually it goes further than that because this forms part of our city vision to be a healthy, happy city and a city with a thriving economy. We've continued to make progress against our ambitions to address modern slavery within the last year, working across all relevant areas of our work as detailed in the report. Of most note is the progress we've made in respect of training, which brings the total number of current staff that have completed modern slavery e-learning course training since we started that action to 737. The report does set out our forward plan for the year ahead, and within this, again, that is set out in the report for you, but just to note the connection between our work to address modern slavery and our work to become a council of sanctuary, and the refresh of our strategic community safety assessment, which will be published in the autumn. Also to highlight other work, which includes our continued efforts to raise awareness of this issue, to hold our own supply chains to account, and the work with police and other partners to respond and disrupt modern slavery activity wherever it occurs. There are 3 recommendations that this report asks that the Cabinet approves. One is that the modern slavery statement and modern slavery and human trafficking statement is signed off by the leader and published on the Council's website, as is our duty to do so. The second is that the programme of work set out in item 11 of the report is approved. And the third is that full council be asked to note the decision of the Cabinet to approve and publish the statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Any comments or questions? Oh, we've got 2. Councillor Mason, I think you narrowly beat him.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted this to pass without comment. I'm happy that it won't do so, because this is not a minor issue. Parliament last year was informed that there are approximately 100,000 people living in this country in conditions of slavery. Anti-Slavery International considers that to be an underestimate, and they see it as 130,000. And they think that is a conservative estimate, and it is the highest estimate ever. And this is important to Portsmouth, since we are a port. We are a port through which people can be trafficked, but also because, like many other port cities, the actual slavery, modern slavery, does exist in this city. We can be pretty sure of that. And so I think this is a very important report for this city. And I am very pleased to note the work for the year ahead, the programme of increasing the awareness, not merely of the existence of modern slavery, which many people have no real acknowledgement of, but also the awareness of what can be done about it, how they can report it, how they can report their concerns. The second thing I'm very pleased to see is the working with the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Modern Slavery Partnership, together with the police, because we're not going to be able to deal with this problem, this offence to our society, unless we have a very good network and they work together and do this. And thirdly, the link with the City of Sanctuary is certainly to be welcomed. Thank you.
Councillor Atwell, I feel he might have stolen one of your lines.
Well, several of them, but it's okay. It's all good.
My apologies, Councillor Atwell.
It's all good. No. Chair, through you, thanks to Caroline, Natasha, and everybody who has been working on this over the past months. And I was pleased to be at an event you supported with Vista, who do lots of important work in the city. Chair, item 11 of the report speaks to the importance of working with partners like Portsmouth City of Sanctuary, who do such outstanding work with vulnerable migrants and hidden communities in Portsmouth. And I'd like to place on record that we're looking forward to working with Portsmouth City of Sanctuary and others as PCC works towards formal recognition of as a council of sanctuary. Can I beg your indulgence for 1 second? You can say no. It's fine. Can I take this opportunity also to congratulate Aspects Portsmouth on being awarded Gallery in Art status by City of Sanctuary UK. So Aspects Gallery is now a Gallery of Sanctuary and the first visual arts organisation in Hampshire to be awarded this accolade. And I'm also delighted to have, a few moments ago, been appointed as PCC rep on their trust. So lots of really good work going on. But Councillor Mason is absolutely right. This is a really important report. And there are many thousands probably of people who might be considered to be victims of modern slavery in the city.
Thank you. I absolutely endorse those comments, and also just to highlight, I know we talked about this before as a cabinet, it's about making this everyone's business, and actually the more this is talked about, the more people are presented with what modern slavery looks like or could look like, the more people will have the confidence to be able to act on that with confidence and knowing that they will be supported by the council or other bodies. So absolutely right. So thank you very much for the report. And the recommendations are: the Cabinet approves the Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking Statement for the signature of the leader and publication on the Council's website. The programme of work set out in item 11 of the report, and that full council shall be asked to note the decision of the Cabinet to approve and publish the statement. So thank you very much, Caroline, for the report, and thank you, colleagues. Okay, item 11. Which is the productivity plan. So, Paddy, thank you for waiting so patiently. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the productivity plan has to be submitted by the 19th of July. It's a government requirement, and as part of that we do need to make sure we have member approval. There was a thought that it might have been shelved on the basis of the election, but DLUC have confirmed that it is still required. It was announced as a requirement in February, and guidance for what had to be included came out in mid-April. There is a requirement that it is short. It says sort of 3, 4, 5 pages, and DLUC sent out a range of questions that they asked authorities to consider when they completed the productivity plan. And this means that the plan makes reference to lots of other documents that we have as approved as a council, such as our corporate plan, our medium-term financial strategy and so forth. Government have said that they will review the plans, and future funding may depend on the analysis of these plans. There are 4 themes within the plan: transformation of services to make better use of resources, opportunity to take advantage of advances in technology and make better use of data to inform decision-making and service design, ways to reduce wasteful spend within systems, and they specifically referenced expenditure on consultants and discredited staff, equality, diversity and inclusion programmes. If you look at Appendix 1, we try to make sure that we're taking the right balance on both of those elements. And then finally, barriers preventing activity that the government can help to reduce or remove. As part of that, we've referenced the short-term funding that government gives to local authorities, and we specifically mentioned the Household Support Fund, which you referenced earlier in that meeting, as an example of where that could be done in a way that could improve services and be more efficient. So we're asking, in terms of recommendations, that you note the requirement to produce and submit the plan, that you approve the proposed plan subject to any requested amendments, and that you delegate authority for finalising and submitting the plan to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy. Any comments or questions? Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you, Paddy, for this report. Well, thank you for doing it, but I'm not thankful for the fact we've had to do it. This is one of the most ridiculous things that government has come out with. Well, this failing, soon-to-be, or almost, well, no, let's be honest, soon-to-be gone government has come out with a load of rubbish over the last few years, but this has to take the biscuit. Local government is the most efficient part of government. It's more efficient than any central government department. It's more efficient than any government quango. And for them to come out and say we have to justify our productivity is quite frankly outrageous. And this is an excellent report because it really does say what we know, which is we are incredibly productive, and we are, we make sure that we run things as efficiently as we can do, alongside our partners, our other local authorities, who are mostly similarly done. Because quite frankly, with the amount of cuts that we've had over the last few years, we have had no choice. Because if we were not productive, then we would not be able to provide services to our residents. And let's just take an example of how unproductive central government is. So during the pandemic, of course, some of us were on the cabinet during the pandemic, and there were some reporting requirements during the pandemic. Now, you would have thought that when you had to report on certain things that were in a particular area, you would have to report back to one part of government. But no, you had to report back to at least two. Exactly the same things. And what did those parts of government do? They didn't even talk to each other. So they didn't know what you were doing. And that continues to this day. We have things, does it come from DLUC? Does it come from DHSC? Does it come from Department of Education? Who knows? They don't talk to each other, so they just keep asking for the same things time and time again. And this is absolutely an example of unproductivity from central government. To demand every local authority, can you imagine the administration that this involves? You have to go out to every local authority, say, you have to come up with a productivity plan. Okay, that takes administration time. You then, after we've taken and wasted this time doing a productivity plan, which quite frankly will serve no purpose because this will almost certainly be binned once the new government comes in next week. So that happens, and then what happens? It goes back to central government, goes back to Whitehall. And what do they have to do with it? They have to comb through every single productivity plan from every single local authority. And then what are they going to do with it? Are they actually going to do anything with it? Or are they just going to tick a box and said, minister said we need to do this, so that's what we've done? And if they don't, it's going to take even more administration to do that. And then they're going to have targets. And if they did do it for funding, they're going to say, well, you have to keep to this target and that target. So they'll probably have to employ more people to actually say, did they meet this target or that target? It is the most load of nonsense I've seen in my life. So thank you, Paddy, for the report. I think it gives a really good breakdown of how productive we are as a local authority, and quite frankly, how much more productive that we are from central government. And I know, because I used to be a civil servant, and I know how unproductive central government is.
I'm taking it and you're not a fan of the process. But I do appreciate you thanking Paddy for all his work and everyone else who's contributed to this in producing a really good report which at the very least demonstrates our productivity and makes us feel better than central government. Councillor Winnington. Any other comments or questions? No. So if I go back to this, the recommendations is that we note the requirement for Portsmouth City Council to produce and submit a productivity plan, approve the proposed plan subject to any requested amendments, and delegate the authority for finalising and submitting the plan to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader. So thank you very much. Thank you, Paddy, for coming and presenting it. And we are now going to go back to item 5, which is the Adult Social Care Self-Assessment for Inspection Improvement Plan. Here's a plan you like, Councillor Winnington. Over to Andy to present the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you, excuse me, follows a report we brought to Cabinet on the 5th of March of this year, where we presented the Adult Social Care Self-Assessment, which is included at Appendix 1. The recommendation is to ask Cabinet to endorse this improvement plan. We've set out the legislative capacity for inspection under the background section and the guidance that has subsequently been published around inspections for the Care Quality Commission to assess councils with adult social services responsibilities for how they deliver on the Care Act. Moving through into the second page of the report, we've set out the time frame for all 153 of those councils to be assessed, to be completed by December of 2025, and included some information about some of the pilots and those that have already been assessed and reported. What we did with the, once the self-assessment had been complete, we moved those things that we needed to address into an improvement plan and aligned that with our business plan for this financial year rather than have two different plans. We felt one was more straightforward and could be monitored more effectively. Further on in the report, we've set out how we've broken down the activity within the plan and then given an example of how that breaks down into the focus, a summary of what it means, the development area we're focusing on, what we're actually going to do, and then the outcomes of that, to try and give that as an exemplar that this isn't a lot of words, it is going to achieve an outcome at the end of it. We've given further examples of some of the work streams that we've picked up on since we put the plan into action, 1st of April this year. And we've also talked about some gaps in capacity that we're identifying as we work through the priorities in the plan and given an example of that. So the recommendations are being made to be transparent and accountable for the delivery of the improvements. As we did with the self-assessment, we felt it was important that this was in the public domain. To ensure that Cabinet are appraised of the plan and aware of what it aims to deliver, and to highlight that if any additional resource may be needed in the short or long term, we'd have a conversation with the Section 151 officer and look to mitigation before seeking further resources. That's a summary of the report for you, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Any comments, questions? Councillor Winnington.
Thank you, Susie, and thanks, Andy, for the report, and obviously all the team that has done this. I know this has been a really thorough process, especially in terms of the self-assessments, which I think it's worth pointing out that there was no formal requirement for the self-assessments. We were told that by government when they reintroduced inspection. But it is obviously best practice, and that was also made clear as well. So I think the fact we've had this time to do that self-reflection, I think has been really, really helpful. And it gives us something really, I mean, whether inspection was there or not, it gives us things that we can really work on. And obviously when inspection does come, when we get the call later this year or next year, we will be in a really good place to be able to move forward. I'm not particularly keen on the fact that inspection has been reintroduced. I think it was abolished for good reason. Again, if we're talking about government inefficiency, the fact that that the amount of money that it was very clear that inspection was going to cost, the amount of money they gave local authorities was significantly insufficient to cover those costs. So again, I mean, we have an inefficient government asking efficiency of local government. But yeah, it is something we needed to do. We've taken a lot of time to do this as well, to make a really thorough thing. We're not being something that's been done in a haphazard, short-term way, engaging with service users as well, which has been really important, because that's the only really way you can really have that self-reflection. And as I say, I wish, one can hope that one day there will be some self-reflection and reflective practice in central government and among government ministers before they think up these wild schemes to make us do stuff that they don't do themselves. So thank you, Andy, and all the team, and I think we're in a really good place now for when inspection does come to us.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Any other comments or questions? No, none from me. I think it's a good report, and it's been interesting to see the progress over the last year. So thank you very much to you and your team, Andy, for all that they're doing. And that and the recommendation is to endorse the improvement plan, which I believe we will. And that, I believe, brings us to the end of the meeting. Is that? Have I forgotten something?
Just for the
I need to read out a paragraph. Beg your pardon. This is related to item 4, again, the appointments to outside organisations and member champions, and it is regarding the European Cities Twinning Committee. Since the agenda was published, Councillors Charlotte Gerarda and Hannah Brent also wish to be members of the European Cities Twinning Committee. We have not yet received a nomination from the Portsmouth Independence Party. I have duly done that, and so that can be added to the minutes. And that brings us to the end of this Cabinet meeting. Thank you very much, members. And there are no there are a few remaining officers and the officers that are remaining, but thanks for all the reports.